Performance management or HR processes tend to be a system of record, and systems of record are backward looking. They are static. For us, collaborative team development is a forward-looking system of action that helps to drive the right day-to-day habits and actions within the team. When we started the company, it was a pipe dream on being able to use AI and feedback. We actually were fairly early adopters of GPT-3 back in 2021. So we started working with OpenAI's technology a couple of years ago. Everything in the product is in the form of a capture. And a capture can be a very quick wellness check-in, or you can capture a quick goal, and a goal can be a target, project, or a skill. So, if you sit around in a room and you reflect on the last quarter and you celebrate yourself and your team members, that gets people into the habit of making captures through a muscle that's easy.
Welcome to another episode of Team Anywhere, where CEOs, leaders, and experts at building teams,
companies,
organizations,
and amazing cultures share how to lead from anywhere in the world. I'm your co-host on the East Coast, Ginny Bianco Mathis.
And I'm your co-host on the West Coast, Mitch Simon. And we invite you to join us to Team Anywhere. Hello and welcome to another episode of Team Anywhere. I'm your co-host, Mitch Simon, on the West Coast, where it's gray, like it always is. And on the East Coast, our amazing, brilliant, talented co-host, Dr. Virginia Bianco Mathis.
Thanks, Mitch.
How are you?
It's actually sunny here in Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. Yeah.
Man,
right.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Well, today on the podcast is, now with these live podcasts, you can see it's Projjal Ghatak. And Projjal Ghatak is the CEO of OnLoop, a company that provides managers and teams with a holistic view of their team's strengths and weaknesses. In 2020, Projjal, with OnLoop, created a category called Collaborative Team Development, CTD, which we're going to talk about, to fundamentally, again, collaborative team development, which is, when I read it, I'm like, oh, this guy is a smart human. So a category called Collaborative Team Development to fundamentally reinvent how hybrid teams are assessed and developed. He is now dedicated to his lifelong mission of unleashing the full potential of the world's 1 billion knowledge workers. That's billion with a B. Hi, Projjal. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Mitch. Hi, Virginia. Thank you for having me.
And Projjal, it is what time and where are you on the planet?
I'm in Singapore right now, and it's 11:07 p.m. But I'm bang in the middle of my Monday to Thursday night shift. So this is not unusual.
Wow, it's great. So we always start with the question: what has surprised you the most about yourself since founding your company? You founded your company at the breakout of the breakout. So what have you been most surprised about yourself since that time?
Yeah, I guess we'll start out heavy, since I guess not a lot of founders are always vulnerable, but the level of anxiety that building a startup can get you to is not something that I thought was possible. And the periodic impact that anxiety can have on your productivity as a generally high-performing human being is also not something that I thought was possible. And so, there are many things hard about building a company and building a startup, especially the first time around. But I could not overemphasize how important it is to stay mentally fit and how little that gets talked about as a key skill more than anything else. People talk about fundraising and hiring people and getting a team, and those are considered skills. But I would say mental fitness and mental agility as a founder is probably the most important skill, bar none. And that's probably been, I would say, quote unquote, surprising as a realization on this journey.
Okay, so we have to take a left turn here. So, really, because everyone who listens to us are humans. What do you think was the greatest support system or practice that you took on to develop this mental agility?
Right.
Yeah, so I think firstly I need to thank my wife, and I don't think I could do this without her. I think both as a person as well as the fact that she works at a big tech company and by and large leads a much more stable life than I do. Now big tech is going through its own challenges at the moment, and so we'll see we'll see how that goes. But we very much think about our lives as a family, as a portfolio, and that means that no matter what happens with the company, that is not existential for us as a family. And I know how big a privilege that is, and how many entrepreneurs may not have that as a support system. And so that's first and foremost. The second is I now have a coach, a therapist, and a psychiatrist, all three. And I recommend every founder who has their sort of struggles or journeys with mental health, which most founders do in many ways. And again, I think it's a privilege to be able to afford, either through health insurance or through company funding, those support pieces as well. But when people climb Mount Everest, they get trained for years when they do that. When people start building companies, they just go straight into it, and that's crazy. um, but I think it's important that if you're an athlete of the mental variety, you also have a support team, because that journey is as hard as a physical athlete. Um, and I think that we will start seeing mental work as a sport, as we lead into what humanity looks like in the next 50 years in the world of AI. And we live in very interesting times with regards to that too. And we will start thinking about therapists as fitness trainers rather than people we have to go to because we're quote unquote sick.
Exactly.
Wow.
I love the triad idea, right? The psychiatrist, the psychologist, and the coach.
Well, with the wife in the middle, Ginny.
Oh, yes.
Wife is in the middle.
Totally.
Most important
Totally.
thing. You guys out there, get a wife. So, so now let's go to the pain points. I'm just really interested what happened, what transpired, such that you woke up one day and you say, I'm going to build a company called OnLoop and have these really cool t-shirts. So what happened, what transpired to get to OnLoop?
Yeah, so I had spent the first decade of my career mostly in larger organizations. So I started my career in management consulting, in Accenture strategy in Southeast Asia, and then right before starting OnLoop, I'd spent about 3.5 years at Uber in a variety of roles. And during that time, I had found myself complaining repeatedly about how broken a lot of HR processes were. And I think in particular performance management was one of them, which felt like an extremely time consuming exercise, which is fine because I think developing people is important and time consuming. But as a process, despite being massively time consuming, still yielded very poor results and outcomes when it came to how we thought about decisions around people. Um, and I'd seen this, always from the lens of an end user, be it as an IC or a manager or a leader of 50 people. And unfortunately, we haven't designed technology for running teams through an end user lens. We've designed communication software, we've designed project management software, we've designed design software with tools like Figma through an end user lens. But we've always looked at talent products or team products from an HR lens. And for a variety of reasons we can go into, that means that teams have been subjected to subpar products in the last few decades. And so OnLoop is about serving teams unapologetically as the most important constituency we serve. Now, HR is a stakeholder in that sort of offering, but our customer is the team, and our job is to create products and offerings and services that serve managers and their teams, especially in this rapidly evolving world of hybrid work and this rapidly evolving world of generative AI.
Right. So the customer is the team, which really doesn't exist out there. So you have this concept, because I think this is really going to land the plane here. Your concept is, again, CTD, not CTD, CTD, collaborative team development. And so what is that, and how is it different from what we do today?
Yeah, I think the best way to summarize it is that performance management or HR processes tend to be a system of record, and systems of record are backward looking. They are static. They involve a lot of form filling, and the objective is compliance and checking a box. Versus for us, collaborative team development is a forward looking system of action that helps to drive the right day-to-day habits and actions within the team. And then we can then use those inputs to create a dynamic system of record using the very best in generative AI. So it does both jobs at the same time, with a much more focus on observing what's happening day to day and leveraging that to create a snapshot versus creating a snapshot from memory backward looking, which is one of the dumbest practices that millions of people in the world still do, and it baffles my mind.
Agreed.
You know when I was reading about your company, it seemed, I mean, and as you're sharing it, it's up to the team to develop the team. That's kind of what I walked away with, which is not the way most systems work, right? Especially when you do a 360, which is usually backwards looking. You're looking at the boss, you're looking at the team, you're looking at the colleagues. When it comes to raise time, when it comes to the number, as I work with some big systems, here's your number. It's 12 or it's 2 or 10 or whatever. It's coming from
the worst.
The boss, right? You're a 2. Bye-bye. Get out
Forever until the next session.
And so it seems like with collaborative team development, you're saying, hey, team, you're going to develop Joe or Mary or Waleed over there. That's your team's responsibility. So tell me more about that.
The reality is it's always been the team's responsibility. Unfortunately, with subpar tooling, subpar processes, and no help, right? So, and we've all heard the issues about taking the high performing IC and making them a manager, and them becoming a first time manager and not knowing what to do. And anybody who's worked in or with high growth tech companies knows how many sort of new managers there are, and how tough it is. But also, the people who are watching you perform all the time is the team. It's the manager, it's your peers, it's your cross-functional stakeholders, and their day-to-day observations are just not easily channeled to a place to enhance the development of each person. And so what CTD aspires to do is make it much easier to jot down those observations and share them in a bite-sized manner, in a way that is fair and kind and direct, and all the good things about radically candid feedback, so that we can both help all of us identify each other's superpowers and blind spots and make us the best version of ourselves. And just providing the aid to do that effectively.
So can you give me an example of that?
Yeah.
I have in my mind from what you described. So you have the system in place. What does it look like on a daily basis?
Yeah, so everything in the product is in the form of a capture, and a capture can be a very quick wellness check-in. So you can check in on whether you're feeling blue or green or yellow or red, and that's visible just to you and your direct manager, because that preserves psychological safety within that unit. Or you can capture a quick goal, and a goal can be a target, project, or a skill. It's not an OKR or a KPI because that is so hard for each individual to truly understand. And so we think about how we can break down work to bite-sized chunks. Or it's a celebrate or an improve with regards to an observation of something that happened. And we help people both through prompts and in the future with generative AI on how to write feedback in a situation behavior impact model. And then we have a set of tags to tag that particular observation with behaviors that someone noticed, and we have a structure around that too. And so we're giving people the vocabulary as well as the simplicity to break down daily things that are happening at work and be able to jot that down either on themselves or for a direct report or a manager or a peer, and do that in a 360 way, but on a much more ongoing basis.
And is it direct? Is it direct? So if I, Projjal, if I give you feedback on my phone, will you see it's from Mitch?
Yeah, so great question. So we really care about psychological safety and how feedback gets delivered, and that's been taught through the experience and changes whether you are giving complimentary feedback, which is also feedback, or you're giving constructive feedback. And if you're giving complimentary feedback, we really recommend and encourage that you share it right away, because we've heard this over and over again from customers, especially if you're sitting at home alone and working on a computer. Like, that capture from a colleague about a job well done is a huge dopamine hit in many ways. But for an improved feedback, we actually recommend that the person jot it down in the app, but share it in person first or on a synchronous medium first before sharing it through the app. Because understanding whether there is psychological safety to receive feedback is very important at the point of delivering constructive feedback. So depending on what type of a capture it is, we change the digital experience to ensure that we preserve psychological safety. And everything that you do in OnLoop is private by default. So it's not going to be shared to HR. It's not going to be shared with your boss's boss. It's shared only when you want to share it. And as a subject, I don't even have to share it with my manager if it's been sent to me, because I can keep it private to myself. And the reason why performance management fails in really eliciting any useful feedback is because people treat it as a system of record, and the real feedback happens offline, right? So as a process, it's a bunch of paperwork, and it doesn't even bring out or elicit the real feedback that you get.
Hey, we're taking a quick break to remind you to support our podcast by hitting the subscribe button and leaving us a review. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps us continue to bring you more engaging and thought-provoking content for leadership and remote work.
How do you deal with, and it may or may not be important, right? I'm trying to think of different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
So I might get feedback over a month's time on this project I'm working on, and it tends to be, oh, this really helped, and this over here, and oh, it might be better if, all right? So it's, one might say it's a bit narrow in its scope of me as a person. You know, maybe I'm doing this great job in terms of the output of the technical work, but I'm really pissing a lot of people off. Okay. So, obviously you are trying to create a safe environment where others can tell me that, but it may not really come up. So I'm just thinking of that scenario. One would hope that I reach out.
Yeah.
Right. That everyone is learning through this process. So how did that come across? I know I did this in a fairly authoritative way. Give me some feedback.
Yeah, I don't know whether you're lobbing me a lowball, but in the product, you can both capture feedback or you can request feedback. So it's both push and pull. And you raise a very important point that often improved feedback won't get delivered unless someone requests it. And so, we now with our customers have been able to replace traditional performance management with our process. And what gets generated at the end of it is what we call a prism summary. And a prism summary needs 8 separate observations to generate a summary. And often a person will have to request improves. They will receive celebrates without getting prompted, but they will need to request in order to get improves. So that's one. I think the second thing is, and I won't give everything away because there's some stuff we'll be releasing in the next few months, but we can use technology to really help people deliver feedback well. And I think that people talk about, AI will make us non-human, etc., but actually I think AI can really help us be more human and really teach us how to speak with kindness across the board and be able to take the emotion away, because often the emotion in feedback is what ruins the feedback. Because I am frustrated is not feedback. That is an emotion that I feel, and that is useless to the recipient and almost irrelevant. Now, when someone shows up late at a meeting, it affects the credibility of the organization, and therefore it is worthwhile to make sure there's better upfront planning to not be late. Is feedback. Now that might mean that as a CEO I'm pissed off, but that's irrelevant, right? And people often get stuck in the emotion of it and forget about the feedback. And that is something that we can also really help people with, to better elicit what's going on in order to make them better. And I'm super excited what we can do with the product in the next few months using some of the very latest in technology to really help people give and receive constructive feedback, which is very, very hard. And we still see our customers struggle with it despite.
And you have, oh, this is exciting. You are filling that one gap. I think you may or may not remember the hoopla about 5 years ago with Deloitte throwing out performance appraisals, and it's going to be these coaching discussions. And that was a step in the right direction in terms of taking things in smaller bites, looking on, the near future, more and less of this or that. Where they had problems, because I've been following up with some of those professionals there, is in the discussion that they're supposed to have, in the dialogue. How do I really say this so it is going to influence in a growing kind of way? And that is exciting if you're able, sounds like, to fill that gap. I want it.
It's when we started the company, it was a pipe dream on being able to use AI and feedback. We actually were fairly early adopters of GPT-3 back in 2021. So we started working with OpenAI's technology a couple of years ago, before the explosion of ChatGPT and everything else. And that's given us a bit of a head start because we've been sort of iterating it a bunch of times, and sort of now allows us to move quickly with it. But if you start adding up language plus voice plus potentially over time imagery, you can get really sophisticated in being able to transform a message and help people deliver it both with directness and kindness, which is what all feedback should be. And I think often people like to blame managers that they're bad people or have bad intention. I don't think anybody ever comes to work and says, "Today I'm going to be a bad manager." It just doesn't happen. And I think most people have good intentions, but without help or without the right help to make it easier. And so, we take inspiration from the fitness industry and what apps like Aura and Whoop and Headspace and Calm and the Apple Watch have been able to do around just making fitness easier and converting all of these complex concepts around your sleep and your diet and your exercise and making that easily measurable. We want to move in that same direction when it comes to team fitness, and team fitness is composed of well-being and goals and feedback and your development.
Great. Can you give us a case study of a company that has adopted your technology and what types of results they've achieved?
Yeah, so we'll actually probably put a press release out on this soon. And there's a company called Socialize in Dubai. And it's sort of a 60, 70 person social media agency. They actually got acquired by a broader group called We Are Social that has about 1,500 person globally a couple of years ago. And they've struggled with this problem for years. It's a 13-year-old company. And for 6 or 7 years, their CEO, Akanksha, has been trying to put in a standard approach and a standard process to developing people. And people have complained and grumbled and refused to do it. And they started working with us about a year ago. And in February of this year, for the first time, they ran reviews for the whole organization using our AI generated Prism summaries. And I think they're the world's first company that's run all their reviews with AI generated summaries, and we're going to put a press release out around that in the next couple of weeks. And their creative director, who used to hate reviews, now willingly, because we see their usage, like the week after reviews, there's still captures going in, right? So it's not that this is a scram at the end to do it. And one of their MDs sort of went out and spoke about how we've been able to change how people look at feedback at work. And instead of criticism, it's now guidance. And the fact that by not giving feedback to your colleague, you're actually doing them a disservice.
Right.
Because it's actually a blind spot and you can't see your own blind spot. Only somebody else can. And so if you don't point out a blind spot to me, you're actually harming your colleagues versus being like, oh, it's not my place to criticize my colleagues. And that shift has just changed culturally how they operate. And so their parent company uses a traditional HR tool, and they're like, nope, we're not going to use it. We're going to stick to OnLoop. And so I get goosebumps sometimes just thinking about that and the fact that a couple of years ago nothing existed, and and then you can actually drive change. And I think those are the moments we end up living for as founders, when you can drive real change and real impact.
How quickly, when you introduce the tool,
Yeah.
how quickly do people, because it's a change in behavior, right?
Yeah.
For me to give you real-time feedback and for me to give you too often.
Yeah.
How quickly does it change, and what causes the adoption?
Yeah, so we very much believe that as a company, it's our job to land that behavior, right? So when we sort of talk to a potential customer, we see ourselves as an outcome, not a tool, right? So, and we typically sort of take the company through a 12-week sprint to sort of get out holistic Prism summaries at the end of it. And we have a set of workshops around capturing your wins for the last quarter and thinking about goals in the right framework to sort of help build that behaviors over time. And you sort of, we think about the 5 layers of CTD, and some muscles are easier, right? So So, if you sit around in a room and you reflect on the last quarter and you celebrate yourself and your team members, that gets people into the habit of making captures through a muscle that's easy. The next muscle we work on is doing regular wellness checks and working on goals. And then you sort of graduate to improves over time, because that's the hardest muscle to work on, and you sort of build that over time, right? And so we usually sort of try and take customers through a 10 or 12-week sprint that we'll run to sort of get that habit into place, because that's our responsibility. We're doing some exciting things with the product in the next few months where we think the product can take on more of that responsibility to sort of drive that level of week-on-week action. But right now, we sort of human augmented as well.
Just one comment that is just further making me excited about this is, like, I have gone in, Mitch, I'm sure you have gone in to different organizations and helped, hopefully somewhat, in using language and using language to give feedback in an accountable but influencing kind of way. And they practice and that kind of thing. Your tool is learning by doing. And that's exciting. And so Mitch's question about how long does it take, and then you really saying, well, we experiment with the different muscle groups, and then it all sort of comes together, and they don't even, in a way, they don't even know what's happening, right? You're changing those synapses in their brain. They're learning this new language.
No, absolutely. And I use the human body and fitness analogies a lot because it's very similar, right? And teams are groups of humans, and humans are atoms and molecules, and so we've never thought about it at a basal level to drive behavior, and that is the sad reality, that no one before us has approached this problem with the same fervor at a time where the conversation is obviously a lot louder in how to think about this behaviorally from that end user lens. Just building a form for capturing feedback will not get you more feedback. And the number of real-time feedback products that take freaking 10 minutes to load on a clunky web browser and called continuous feedback are mind-blowing, right? And it's not going to be behavior changing if the damn thing doesn't make it fun to use, right?
Task.
And so it's one more form to fill, and we all have enough of those to fill. And which is why we had to sort of go and build a new category, because just the baggage of the terrible tools that people have seen have made them run away from goals and feedback and the very things that are foundational for developing people. And I was one of those people, right? So, and I suffered with Workday and Reflective for many years that led me to do what I do. Right? So.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful product. So great to have you on the show. So our last question is, if people want to learn more about OnLoop, if they want to get connected to you, what should they do?
Yeah, so luckily OnLoop is easier to pronounce and find than Projjal Ghatak. And so it's quite easy to find OnLoop both on onloop.com on the web or OnLoop on LinkedIn. And from an email perspective, I'm Projjal at onloop.com and Projjal on LinkedIn, and I read every email and every LinkedIn message I get. I may not reply to all of them, but I do read all of them. And so
11 o'clock at night in Singapore. Yes,
I'm easy to find.
Yeah. Well, Projjal, thanks so much for your time. I know you're busy. Thank you, Ginny, for lovely co-hosting. Thank you to our audience and to all of those out there who are dying to give their colleagues feedback that is productive and effective. And thank you for this product. So until next time, this has been an exciting episode. We'll see you on our next episode of Team Anywhere.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content from our podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share the video with your friends so they can join the conversation too.